What does your industry need? Okay, so this is an interesting question because likely the industry that you've chosen, there's problems with it. There's ways that it can be innovated, improved. So this is a way of looking at the bigger picture of your specific industry that you have your skill set, your passion in, and seeing what's the next step for it. And I'm going to share with you an example of my journey, which evolved in this sense. And so the beginning of this, I'll just put this right here. uh, I started learning these things from spiritual mentors with spiritual language and spiritual philosophies. And so I first started with saying, okay, this stuff's really, really powerful. And how can we put practical words to it, measure results? That was really the big thing. It's like, okay, I know this stuff's powerful, yet how can we relate it to real life in practical words and also measure the progress? Because especially with spiritual development, there's a lot of inner work and there's a lot of changes. Yet I was always looking for, okay, how can we measure this? Because I knew if we were able to measure it, then it would it would allow more people to benefit from that journey. Whereas usually in the world, especially at that time, there was just, I mean, it's crazy. It wasn't even that long ago. It was like 8 years ago. But there was less focus. The inner journey was, there wasn't respect for the inner journey. There really wasn't as much as there is now. And it's amazing how many things have changed in that amount of time. So it used to be kind of like, if it doesn't make money, it don't matter. If I can't see the tangible results, then it must not be worth it. And not having respect for the inner journey that then allows the tangible results to happen or even be kept. So then I started looking at, okay, what are the practical ways of describing these, non-spiritual words to describe these, to measure the journey. And that brought me to researching different areas, different philosophies, researching different geniuses throughout history. So I started to find, okay, there's the spiritual way of describing things, and then what's kind of more the down-to-earth way of describing things, because they're both talking about the same things oftentimes. Yet what are those words that allow what are those words that allow to be the bridge between both? And that's where I started finding that and bringing that into the spiritual work to make it more down to earth and concrete. And that's the feedback that I got from people. It was like, okay, it's the depth of the spiritual wisdom with the practicality. And that's what I used to tell people too. I mean, I guess I still do now, which is like, I like to have a foot in both worlds. One in the spiritual, one in the practical and tactical, and be the bridge and merge both and weave them both together. And that brought me to developing the color scale from the Dr. David Hawkins scale of consciousness, because it's like, okay, let's measure this journey. And I kept seeing the same journey from people in entrepreneurship who would build the business they want, would get freedom, and then they'd go on a more spiritual type inner journey, and that could look in many different ways, but they're going on an inner journey, and then they'd have specific problems and specific experiences. And then some of them would get stuck there, and then some of them would find their way through to the next level. And so I kept seeing this time and time again. And shout out to Brenda Matheson, because we had to have a lot of conversations to decode what this thing was that we kept seeing it time and time again with people. Yet it took a while to find the right language, and that's where the color scale came and was a huge part of that. It was like, wow, we were able to measure and simplify these stages of the journey. And especially when it comes to like philosophy or spirituality, before this color scale work, it kind of was this idea that, you'd go and you'd expand, and then your life would be all gravy after that. You'd just be awakened, you'd be enlightened, and it was all good. Well, it's like, okay, that really wasn't the case. A person's starting to open it up into some green energy, but we still got to evolve the yellow energy and the red energy. So that was the next evolution of what the industry needed, and needed simplifying the journey, and to see what was the next step, and people be able to assess where they were at in that journey, because otherwise it was pretty ambiguous. It was very ambiguous. And then that has evolved to the next step, which will be, okay, how does this affect the biology of the body? And that's where we're starting to see, like, with the incorporation of the neurons in the head, heart, and stomach, The next evolution for us is to start tracking these changes of like coherence, of shadow work, of emotional clearing, of the light body activations, tracking what's going on in the body with scientific equipment. So that's next. And the next kind of in alignment with that is also has to do with this quote, we are now gods, but for the wisdom. So exponential technology is taking off. If we don't match the wisdom with that power, then we're going to destroy ourselves. So we need to match our wisdom with the incredible power that's at our hands technologically. So the next step in alignment with that, and there's this other quote by Errol Ozen, which is intelligence without wisdom brings destruction. So similar things here. So the next thing is for this industry that I'm focused on is for us to quantify wisdom. And that's what we're starting to do with the color scale. So it's to measure and track so we can see us gaining more wisdom, upping our wisdom score and applying it. Not just knowing it, but actually doing it. Because if we don't do it, then do we truly know it? So this was inspired, in my journey, I was really inspired by martial arts with this. And specifically being in jiu-jitsu, because the combat martial arts, there's no hiding in it. You have to demonstrate what you know, not just kicking pads like it was when I was in karate, but you have to be against a live resisting opponent. And so we need, just like in martial arts and jiu-jitsu, it's like you can watch tons of videos on different moves. You can think in your head that you are, this good. But then once you get grappled and you're going against somebody, you see really quickly the reality of where your knowledge is at. And you can know something, but it's a much different thing to have your subconscious doing the move. So this is what I see in wisdom in the personal development journey, is that it's easy for us to think that we're farther along than we are. And as humans, especially business owners, we're motivated by increasing our results. So that's really the next step of what I see the industry needing, is measuring our growth, measuring our applied wisdom. And as we can measure that, we can improve it. And there's this quote in business that what gets measured gets managed. And that's the same thing. Is like we've basically been not able to measure personal development, just barely with ambiguous things of like being able to see, their business go forward, which is a marker, or maybe just telling that a person's different. Yet the more we bring measurement to this, the more we as a species can track and improve and manage it. That will up our wisdom score, both at an individual level, both at a community level, both at a company level, and also as a collective human species level. So that's a few examples of how it's evolved in my journey, of seeing what one part of the industry needs. And then spirituality, then it opened up to people on the inner journey and seeing what that group of people, what that industry needed, and more. And the interesting thing with this too is that you can actually see the audience got broader and broader and broader, more and more universal, as steps up the ladder were solved, so to speak. So think with your industry, what does it need? And give yourself permission to innovate. Again, we're living in exponential times. People are changing. Things are changing. So what does your industry need? If you had a magic wand and you could just bink, give your industry what it needed, what would that be? And how can you integrate that vision with your business?